Hello, greetings, welcome, and thank yous. I'm Professor Moptop, and welcome to the weekly Patreon update video. This week has been a whole lot of time with me spending digging through pages and pages and websites all about novelty Beatles songs. It's a huge list. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between that and a section of the book which will be about one of my very favorite things, Bob Dylan and the Beatles, and how in 1965 they were very closely connected. Of course, they met in late 1964, which by then John Lennon and the Beatles were already really trying to write songs that had kind of a Bob Dylan feel about them. One of the songs that is featured this week is You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, which was extremely Dylan influenced. John was even trying to kind of sing like him a little bit as he performed it. He wanted to sound just like Dylan. There are a couple of similarities between that and a song called I Don't Believe You, She Acts As If We've Never Met, which is a Bob Dylan song on the Another Side of Bob Dylan album. Also, something interesting on the You've Got to Hide Your Love Away track is an additional musician that wasn't one of the four Beatles or George Martin. It's a guy named Johnny Scott, who was an arranger that they knew, and he plays two flutes on the track, a tenor and an alto. He was invited by the Beatles to perform on the track. That's a cool thing to be. And he was the first. After that kind of opened things up. Then came Yesterday, then came Eleanor Rigby. Of course, there's hundreds of musicians on the Sgt. Pepper album, and it all starts with a guy named Johnny Scott. The other song of the week is also Dylan influenced, and it's also from the Rubber Soul era, and it's George's Think for Yourself, which was greatly inspired by a different Bob Dylan song called Positively 4th Street. In both songs, the singer is singing to a person directly and not very happy, not real loving. Both of them could kind of be considered romantic, but not necessarily are they romantic. They might just be nastiness in general. And it's an interesting type of song. It's one of my very favorite George songs, and it's interesting that George took some inspiration from Bob Dylan, and he also took some inspiration from Lennon and McCartney. He uses the word misery, which of course isn't a word that John and Paul invented, but one that they were big fans of. He also uses the word opaque. That's not a word that you hear a lot in rock and roll. They recorded the song in one take, and then they did a bunch of overdubs. And as they overdubbed them, first George sang with John and Paul doing harmonies, and then they overdubbed George's lead vocal with John and Paul also overdubbing their background vocals, which means there were 6 singing Beatles on this, and this was a new thing for them, and they would continue to explore different types of combinations of how many different Beatles who were singing at the same time. Some songs have up to 7 singing Beatles. Paul also adds a second bass onto this song. He played a bass on the rhythm track, and then he added one that was played through a buzz box, which gives it that kind of it's called controlled distortion. It's kind of a buzz-based noise. You know it when you hear it. And this is all going to be going in the Dylan influence of the book. I came across a really cool book. It's called The New Sound, Yes! And it's kind of interesting because it's from 1966, which gives a different type of a perspective on music history before Sgt. Pepper, before Revolver came out. The Beatles are highly regarded in that. They get some things right in the book. The Bob Dylan section is fascinating because they really understood where he stood in the world of music and rock and roll, and not just folk, but not just folk, but rock and roll as well, and lyrically with some of the Motown acts becoming more social and more aware, influenced greatly by Bob Dylan. There's going to be a nice big chunk about Bob Dylan in the Volume 3 book. I have to be careful to remember that it is indeed a Beatle book and not a Bob Dylan book. One more interesting thing about Think for Yourself is while they were rehearsing, George Martin rolled tape for something they could maybe use for the upcoming Christmas release. Each year they would send something to the fan club and they would record it. They did a bunch of them. See the world famous Honey Pie walking around back there? They recorded a bunch of rehearsals of them trying to get the song down, and George Martin saved it onto a tape saying this will be used eventually. Well, they didn't use it for the 1965 Christmas message, but for the Yellow Submarine film, there's the part when the Beatles sing to wake up the sleeping guy, and that's where they got that hunk of them singing Think for Yourself. I will be sending out via WeTransfer 4 separate files. You're going to have the 2 songs of the week, which is You've Got to Hide Your Love Away and Think for Yourself. I'm also going to throw in, for no extra charge, I'll Cry Instead, because it uses the expression hiding your love, and I don't want to spoil the party because it's a very early Dylan-y sounding song. Thank you, thank you, thank you as always. As always, if you have questions, let me know. If you have compliments, let me know. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon thing, and thank you very much for being part of part 3 of Professor Mop Top's Textbook Beatles. And thank you.